Ah, hello. It's Friday night, and quite naughtily, we've done The Firemaker, which is the fourth ever episode of Doctor Who. Although, even more naughtily, we did it last night because, quite honestly, couldn't resist because it's all so much good fun. So, The Firemaker. And here are my thoughts. It's very interesting seeing the conclusion of what is either known as An Unearthly Child or 100,000 BC, depending probably on either how much better you think the first episode is than the following three, or how one feels you should honour the intentions of the crew in what their first story was trying to achieve. You've got to bear in mind, I think, that although the first story is obviously there to set the ball rolling with this long series that they didn't think was, might not last more than 13 episodes. This first story, as far as I'm aware, was always penciled in to be a caveman type story. And so it's only with hindsight that the first episode has kind of completely outweighed the following three in everybody's consciousness. And it's very easy to consider it, the second, third and fourth episodes of Doctor Who as just being filler until you get to the next story, of which more next time, and which arguably has a greater impact on the longevity of Doctor Who and whether or not it actually survived beyond its 13 episode run. But episode 4, it's very telling that the two things that most readily stick in my mind completely outweigh the two things which probably were supposed to stick, which were the intended things to stick in the viewer's mind back in the day. And the two things that I think were supposed to stick was the cavemen fight, which is done with some it's different film technique. I'll have to look that up. But essentially, the multi-camera vibe that you're used to changes to what looks like a filmed drop-in of two cavemen fighting, intercut with close-ups of our heroes' faces as this fight continues. The fight with the best in the world is a bit more women in love than it probably intended to be, apart from the very end, which is horrific. One guy pummels the other guy's head out with a rock. This was shown at probably about 6 o'clock in the evening in early December 1963. And seriously, one guy at the end of the fight, which goes on for quite a while, picks up a rock and dashes another guy's head in with it. Bonkers. I think the other thing that's supposed to stick was the cunning plan that the team have to get out of the Cave of Skulls again, because we've been escaped and recaptured, as you'd expect in Doctor Who, and that is to put skulls on flaming torches, which is just a bit daft, really. I mean, the amount of fire in this episode is quite telling. There's fire all over the place. Once the fire gets going, we've waited 2 episodes to see any real fire. And then when it gets going, let's have fire here, fire there. That must have been, I assume that was slightly impressive, perhaps. I don't know, to a televisual viewer in 63. There's fire going all over the place. Let me just make sure I'm still here. Oh, yeah. The two things that really stick, the two things that will stay with me about the episode, is just after the guys have been recaptured at the start, the Doctor suddenly becomes the Doctor. And it's dead simple little trick that he does. He cons Cal into showing him his knife. and he does it with a bit of flannel, a bit of talk. He basically says, Cal says, Tsar killed the old woman with this knife. The doctor says, nah, I don't think he did it with this knife. There's no blood on this knife. And Cal goes, oh, it's a bad knife. It lies. It doesn't tell the truth what it does. And the doctor goes, no, it's the finest knife I've ever seen. It's a fantastic knife. Brilliant knife. Ooh, good knife this. Which, in the context of the story where one guy's trying to outdo the other, says, no, look at my knife. And of course, Cal's knife's got blood on it. And then they drive him out. And for a brief moment, the doctor's the doctor. Because it's not even that clever. And certainly within the way that the cavemen have been set up as being far stupider than our heroes, it's not that great. But, just for a moment, the doctor's there. It's a really good feeling. A really, really good feeling. The other thing that sticks with me about the episode is when they get back to the TARDIS after a bit of a run through the forest again. And getting back to the TARDIS, there's a frizz-on. There's a real sense of excitement. Whoa, back in the TARDIS. That's really, really good. Now, it's possible that the 1963 average viewer would have gone, way, we're back in. At least the however many million who watched the first episode. It was repeated the week after. On the 30th of November, it was repeated. But being back in the TARDIS was fantastic. And then, of course, given the conventions of the time, we're immediately into the next adventure. Immediately onto the next story. And just a load of cavemen. Last we see, the caveman is agog at this TARDIS that's disappeared. Or this cave or rock or tree or whatever euphemism they used to describe it to these people who seem to be stupider than they. So anyway, that's fabulous. Loved it. Being back in the TARDIS was, we're back in. There's an awful lot of flannel. I still feel a bit uncomfortable about the whole these people are stupider than us. Although, an interesting point that has been brought to my attention is that there are a number of parallels that go on in the story. I don't think it's quite clear enough to bring them out to their full extent, but the power struggle between Cal and Tsar, one could say, mirrors the power struggle between Ian and the Doctor. I think that's a bit nonsense because I don't really think the power struggle between Ian and the Doctor really shines through. It's muddied by the fact you've got Barbara in the mix. And you can only go so far. The other parallel is that the Doctor and Susan are could arguably look at Ian and Barbara as primitives, and the Doctor certainly does look at them as primitives. And I think one of the interesting narrative things that happens, story things that happen, is how the Doctor develops into the role of the Doctor, fills the space in the middle of Doctor Who the programme with the character of the Doctor through his relationship with Ian and Barbara. Where was I going with this? Oh yes, so the fact that Ian and Barbara, Ian in particular, I think it's fair to say, is patronising about the cavemen is you could argue is a parallel, but again, I don't think the programme itself is clever enough to tease that out. I don't really feel that there's a sense of the story being aware that that's going on. If it is, it's not brought out well enough. But anyway, I'm trying to justify something that's made me feel awkward in that regard. But I shouldn't, because ultimately we've had a 4-part story, whether you call it An Unearthed Child or 100,000 BC, and it's been good, and I've really enjoyed it, and I've taken each episode in its as an entity all of its own, and that's a much more fun way of watching it. That is certainly the ideal way to watch Doctor Who. Certainly this story, at least. They may find exceptions when we get to number 500 and something, or maybe when we get to a number 70 and something, or even the next story. Although I know what the next story is, and I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy it a damn sight more in its respective chunks. So, to sum up, Doctor Who got off on a good start. Its first episode, I think, and gave it an impetus, certainly in terms of the narrative and the story and the vibe. I think that gave it the push it needed. I think that the novelty of it probably helped drive it forward for the next few weeks, and we all know there's something coming that's going to really push it onwards. Certainly in 2 weeks' time, if not arguably at the end of next week. But it's I think by today's standards, the first episode aside is a curio. It works. There's some nice moments in there. I think that some of the interplay between the characters is teased out quite nicely. It's certainly not a dud, but it doesn't quite live up to the hype of its first episode. But that's fine. That's good. That's all right. So that's the Firemaker, and we're on to, I can't remember what the next one's called. It's certainly not the D word. I'm not sure if any of the next 7 episodes are called the D word, but they're certainly going to start having their way to a major or lesser extent. I've got to be careful not to whiz on too much because I'm really waiting for the Reign of Terror to get released on the 28th of January, fact fans. Although I do have a little Amazon basket with the censor rights and whatever else it popped in there to make sure I'm covered in the forthcoming weeks. Bang on, that'll do. We love the Who. Get in. Bye.